know life is waiting on you to live it, waiting on you to experience all of the beautiful moments that haven't yet happened, but somehow you've convinced yourself it's too late. You've convinced yourself that the window of opportunity has closed, that the chance to build a beautiful life has already passed you by. That being in your early, your mid, or your late 30s without the career you imagined, without the income you thought you would be making by now, renting versus owning, surviving instead of thriving, means that you missed your moment. Seriously, I need to ask you, who convinced you that life couldn't start in your 30s? Better yet, let me ask you this. Why have you not forgiven yourself yet? Because that's the real issue. Living in constant comparison to what you thought life would look like versus accepting what life actually looks like is what is keeping you mentally stuck. Replaying the pivotal moments, second guessing every single decision that you've made, truly wondering, who would I have been if I just chose differently? That level of self-judgment is one of the most subtle but destructive forms of self-punishment. Aren't you even the slightest bit curious what happens when you actually forgive yourself instead of punishing yourself for not figuring life out sooner? Because curiosity is the beginning of movement. All it takes is one step for everything else to start revealing itself. Got a little nippy in here. I had to put a sweater on because it's sweater weather. From personal experience, I can tell you this: carrying the weight of regret, grieving the life you thought you were supposed to live, replaying what should have happened by now is honestly one of the most exhausting ways that we slowly give away our time, our energy, and our presence. It doesn't feel like a waste of time when you're inside of it. When we are truly trapped in a mental space that is just filled with disappointment, it doesn't feel like a waste of time. And I think that's important to acknowledge. But over time, that disappointment creates a mental smog, and that smog clouds our ability to think and process effectively. So instead of moving forward, you stay suspended in comparison, comparing who you are today versus the version of yourself that you imagined maybe when you were in your late teens or your early 20s. Let's talk about grief for just a moment. Grieving the life that you thought you were supposed to have. Grief is commonly defined as a deep sadness caused by loss or a prolonged state of suffering. Here's the thing about grief we rarely acknowledge. There is unavoidable suffering and then there's avoidable suffering. Unavoidable suffering happens when something is taken from you. So this is usually what we experience when we're grieving the loss of a loved one, or we've been betrayed, or that there is just a circumstance that is out of our control. Unavoidable suffering most definitely deserves compassion. It deserves you taking the necessary time that you need to emotionally process on a deeper level. But mentally and psychologically suffering over a life you thought you were supposed to live, that, my dear, is avoidable. And what's worse is it quietly turns into self-inflicted punishment. When you grieve a version of life that never actually existed, you are placing yourself in a psychological war that literally nobody is asking you to fight. You're stuck carrying a weight that was never meant to be permanent. Now, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I do believe I have figured it out. After doing a lot of observing and doing some personal reflecting in my own life, I have found that there are two main drivers behind why so many women grieve the earlier version of life that they envisioned. It's almost always the same two: finances and career. Do your finances define your worth? No. Does your career define your worth? Absolutely not. However, these two things specifically are positioned as highest ranking on the scorecard of adulthood. As I was preparing for this video, it really dawned on me, I think there has always been a misconception surrounding being in your 30s, and I think it's been there for decades. This unspoken belief that by 30, you should have life completely figured out, that you should be well established in a solid career, that you should be making well above six figures, especially in today's economy, that you should have traveled by this point in your life multiple times internationally at that, and that you should be financially stable, not just when we're talking about money, but we're talking about you should have an excellent credit score. You should have above a 700 right now. Here's what's happening to a lot of us. We wake up in our 30s and we realize that some, many, or all of these boxes haven't been checked. It sends our nervous system, better yet, it triggers our nervous system to go into a complete panic. In that moment of panic, we don't have the ability to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, well, girl, this is just temporary. This is only one small little circumstance out of your life. You'll move on. You'll do better. We cannot see life in those moments that way. So automatically our minds start moving backwards. When that panic sets in, something subtle but very dangerous begins to happen. We lose our ability to reflect and we automatically go into a spiral. You start with revisiting the dream, and then from there you move into replaying every old decision, and then from there you move into trying to locate the exact moment in your life where you feel like things went wrong. You question your judgment, and then before you realize it, you are full on regretting how your life has turned out up until this point. Now, the spiral of your life's decisions gained some intensity that I feel like we absolutely have to acknowledge. I am talking about what happened around 2010 to 2013. Actually, it probably was a little earlier than that, but for the sake of this video, let's just say 2010 to 2013. There was a shift that happened. Social media. Millennials, which of course we know they are in their 30s, possibly early 40s, became the first generation to enter adulthood while having a front row seat to watching everybody else's life, watching how their life turned out, watching the highlight reel. Literally, for the first time in history, we got the chance to watch people our own age appear to live the lives that we ourselves wanted. We got to watch them build that life from scratch. Gen Z and future generations, they will experience an even more amplified version of this, especially because there is such a rise, and a continuous rise at that, in the creator economy. But millennials experienced this first, and the problem is we were not equipped with an emotional framework to protect ourselves mentally from what we were watching and absorbing. If you're grieving a life that you didn't get to live while simultaneously watching someone else appear to live the exact life that you want, not only are you going to be filled with avoidable grief, but you're also going to be filled with envy. You're also going to be filled with jealousy, and you're also going to be filled with comparison. And that comparison is like quicksand. The more you stare at where someone else is, the more stuck you become, and the less capacity that you have in order to take even just one step forward in your own life. This becomes an unbearable weight that we carry, especially for women, because for us, it's not just the pressure of not being further along in life. We have so many other pressures that present themselves. For example, motherhood. Whether you have children, want them, or questioning if that chapter will even happen for you in your life. There's the pressure of maintaining a marriage, and if you're not married already, then there's the pressure of finding the perfect partner to build a life with, and then finding this partner before the biological clock runs out. There's the pressure of wanting to further your education, but you also realize that time, energy, and resources aren't as available as they once were. And all of this exists on top of the disappointment that you're already carrying about where you thought you would be by now. We look up one day and wonder where all the years have gone, and I'll tell you this, the years have gone by because regret stole our ability to be present. And that's not living. That is constantly replaying. And honestly, that is the real cost of not forgiving yourself. I want you to try looking at your life through an as-is lens, because life, just like people, we do not always arrive in perfect condition. When I say as is, of course, I'm talking about maybe a small cosmetic flaw. Maybe there's a little scratch. Maybe there's a little dent. I want you to think about a scenario where you might go to a discount appliance store. Same brand, same performance, same functionality, but there's just a minor little flaw. Here's the thing about it though, that tiny little defect that most likely happened during shipping and handling does not have an effect on how that particular product works. I bought a dresser from Wayfair years ago. When I got the dresser, I noticed that there was like a rattling sound coming from inside, and I was like, I can't figure out what it is. Finally, I pulled the drawer out enough and leaned it on its side to realize that there was a broken piece of wood floating around in the inside. So I called Wayfair and I'm like, hey, is there any way that I can have this dresser replaced? Well, actually, I know specifically when this was. It was during COVID, because back then, all of the shipping times were delayed. If I'm not mistaken, she quoted me like 9 months before that product would come back in. And I was like, no, I mean, it still has functionality. It still works. So I ended up asking the lady, I'm like, is there any way that I can get a discount? And she's like, sure. So they took off a significant amount of money because I decided to keep that dresser. There may have been a slight markdown on that price, but it did not take away from the value. Yes, I still have that dresser 6 years later. Yes, it still has all of the functionality that it had from day one. It just has a small little defect that nobody can even see. We've identified that as is means there's a scratch or a blemish or a flaw of some sort. But truly getting down to defining as is condition, that means that yes, there may be slight damage from a previous circumstance, but that damage does not determine its ability to perform. Forgiving yourself is choosing to accept yourself as you are right now, not after you've had time to play catch up and you feel like, okay, I'm finally caught up in life, not after you've had time to fix everything, not after you've been able to go back and redeem the past. It is about as is condition right now, and then deciding that the blemishes of your past will not interfere with your capacity to build, create, or grow and become right now in this moment. And lucky for us, we're human beings. You don't even have to worry about price being deducted because we don't have a price on our life to begin with. You're not discounted. You still have value. You just have to be able to see the value within yourself. With this approach, you do begin to realize something very important, and that is that forgiveness is not about excluding your past. It's not pretending your mistakes didn't have consequences, and it's definitely not about bypassing accountability. Forgiveness is all about embracing and appreciating the lessons instead of allowing the lessons to turn into lifelong self-punishment. Ask yourself honestly, if we erased all of our past mistakes, what would we learn from? What would we grow from? Who would we be without contrast? Most of the wisdom that you have right now, today, came from moments that you didn't plan for, from decisions you wouldn't dare repeat today, from seasons that forced you to mature before you were ready. There was a time in my life when I unknowingly became the other woman. I mean, talk about painful. This was my first heartbreak. I was so heartbroken. I was confused. I was embarrassed. The way that I found out about the situation, I was like, damn, I got played. But had that situation never happened, I would have never learned how to place a high value on myself when it came to dating. It took for that situation to happen one time. And I do mean one time for me to learn that I demand honesty in my relationship. I demand clarity as far as what are we doing? Are we in a relationship? Like, I need to know, and I need to define things up front. I needed to demand being respected. And you know what? The relationship I got in after that, I made sure that I set all of those things, all of those boundaries in place for myself. And guess what? I'm married 13 years later to that same dude. Happily married at that, let me specify. There was also a time earlier in my 20s when I experienced getting a car repossessed. Like, who really wants to admit that out loud? It's so embarrassing, and I don't feel it now, but I felt all this shame back then. My car got repossessed, and it got repossessed at the mall of all places. But paying it off in my 30s, and might I add that I only have $2,000 left. I only have $2,000 left. But that situation taught me something way deeper than any credit score could have taught me. It taught me integrity. It taught me responsibility. It taught me to keep my financial commitments even when things are uncomfortable. Your former self, she was not irresponsible by any means. She was learning. She was learning with the information, the tools, the emotional regulation, and the self-awareness that she had at that time. And it's okay if some of that information was limited. It's okay if your coping skills were underdeveloped. It is okay if you were operating from survival mode instead of operating with clarity. Not one person breathing on this earth right now knows exactly what to do at every stage of life. We were not designed that way. Babies, they have to learn how to crawl. Kids, they have to learn how to swim. Teenagers, they have to learn how to drive. When you get to your 20s, you have to learn how to navigate in life without mommy and daddy being 100% in control. We cannot place an expectation on ourselves to master life without trial and error. Forgiveness, that's maturity. Forgiveness is honesty. Forgiveness is saying, I didn't know then what I know now, and that does not make me behind. It makes me human. The shift is almost instantaneous when you forgive yourself and you let that avoidable grief go. Something very powerful that happens. It's subtle, but it's very powerful. You gain this willingness to try again. And I'm not talking about showing up just one time and trying. I'm talking about you continue to show up and you have this willingness to try until something clicks. Trying no longer feels embarrassing. It no longer feels like proof that you failed. And this matters because embarrassment is one of the main reasons we stay stuck in our lives, especially in our 30s. By this point in life, again, we're told what? We're told that we should be stable, that we should be established. So when we're not stable and we're not established, trying something new feels humiliating. It feels like you are openly admitting to the world that you did not get it right the first time. And because of that, many people would rather sit quietly in the dissatisfaction. We'd rather sit and stew internally in what we didn't accomplish rather than publicly attempt something unfamiliar. But when you forgive yourself, and I mean truly forgive yourself, trying becomes more important than avoiding embarrassment, because now you've accepted something deeply freeing. You accept the fact that you are human. You accept the fact that you're imperfect and that the growth requires motion rather than image protection. Willingness is what replaces shame. So you stop asking yourself, well, what will this look like if I fail? And instead you start asking yourself, what could happen if I try? It's like you allow yourself to become that innocent version of yourself again. That innocent version that all of us were as children, and we dreamed big. That's what you're allowing yourself to get back to before the world told you to be practical. Forgiveness gives you permission to finally evolve. Willingness gives you permission to choose again. And having to choose again in life is not failure, is wisdom. I came across a clip recently of Danessa Myrick. She was a guest on the Tamron Hall show. And on that clip, she discussed how it wasn't until after 30 that she finally took that leap of faith and truly bet on herself. Today, Danessa Myrick's beauty is a multi-million-dollar brand that gets several of my coins on the regular because yes, her products are just that good. And that is not a good with a D at the end. There is an apostrophe T. They are so good. Here's why her story matters. She's not an exception. She is one of many women who created something meaningful, profitable, and aligned after 30. The difference wasn't age. It wasn't timing. It wasn't luck. It was release. And I'm going to repeat that one more time. The difference actually has nothing to do with age. It doesn't have anything to do with time, and it doesn't have anything to do with luck. It is release. When you forgive yourself, you reclaim the energy that says, this is my journey. You stop second guessing yourself. You stop replaying old decisions. You stop asking, what if I had done it sooner? And instead, you start asking yourself, what can I do now? Release removes the mental drag. It frees up creativity. It frees up clarity. And once you are no longer stuck in the past, life can finally meet you where you are. How good can life get, you ask? It can get as good as you want it to get. You don't need to be a decade younger. You do not need to go back in time. You don't need a do-over for life to start getting good for you right now. And I'm not just talking about financially. I am talking about all of it. I'm talking about the peace that you feel when you wake up to a new morning without dread sitting on your chest. Finally writing the book that you never had the courage or the clarity to start. Building new, meaningful relationships. Learning about investing because now you're finally thinking long-term instead of just trying to survive. Solo traveling for the first time because now you trust yourself enough to go. Truthfully, and I can say this because I'm in my 30s, 30s is young. I know society likes to paint this picture, like I said again, that we're supposed to have it all figured out. I can't speak for you, but I definitely don't. I don't have life figured out. Like literally, I feel like a teenager, raising a teenager some days. My oldest son is 13. I very much so still feel like a teenager raising him. I just went to prom. What feels like yesterday, I'm like about 12 years ago. But I feel like I went to prom just yesterday. Actually, that was over 12 years ago. I still feel very young at heart. And I guess that's what I want you to understand is that you have to be young at heart. You have to be curious. You have to be open to learning. That is something that forgiveness also gives you. Forgiveness is what allows you to drop those stipulations, and it gives you the permission to stop measuring your life and actually start living your life, because at the end of the day, we only get one opportunity at life, and you deserve to experience life fully. And on that note, that is all that I have for you all today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. This conversation meant a lot to me because, again, this is a stage in life that I'm in currently right now. So I get it. If you're in your 30s, I get it. I've probably had the same feelings and thoughts that you've had. So I wanted to make this one a little personal. But again, I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I will see you next week. Until next time, my loves. Bye.